So we'll get that part out of the way. Senior Corporal Mark Meltaberger, Meltaberger. And Senior Corporal Meltaberger has been with the department 13 years and 7 months. He is an FTO, and he has been training for 4 years. And he's assigned to the Southeast Patrol Division. Officer Jamel Robinson, Robinson. Officer Robinson has been on the department 10 months. He is on training. He has been out of the academy 7 weeks. Officer Robinson is the individual that discharged his weapon. I'm sorry, yes, Jamal. And I hope I'm saying it correctly, but Jamal or Jamel? Thank you, sir. When I talk about this, I may reference them as the FTO and the trainer. So if I do that, Senior Corporal Meltaberger is going to be the FTO, and Officer Robinson would be the trainee or the recruit. Okay. Our deceased, as the suspect, is Gerardo Gerardo Pinedo, Pinedo. He's a junior. He's an Hispanic male, 2'10", 94. Mr. Pinedo is deceased. He died approximately 8:30 this morning at Baylor Hospital. He has no criminal history with the Dallas Police Department. Officers Meltaberger and Robinson were dispatched to burglary in progress in the 1600 block of Connor Drive at approximately 10 p.m. Last night. The officers were actually directed to the residence next door to 1639 Connor, which is where the offense was occurring. There they were met by the reporting person, the individual that had called 911. The reportee shared some information with the officers that he had heard a lot of loud noises and disturbances coming from that residence, and the officers inquired as to whether or not somebody should be at that location. He was uncertain whether or not somebody should be there, but he believed that the house was being burglarized. Senior Corporal Meltaberger and Officer Robinson proceeded toward 1639. As the officers walked down the driveway towards the house, they both drew their pistols. Senior Corporal Meltaberger directed Officer Robinson to go to the opposite corner of the house, and he proceeded along the north end of the house and walked past that part of the house into the backyard. Senior Corporal Meltaberger heard loud noises. He heard yelling. He knew somebody was inside. It was unintelligible yelling, almost to the scream. Officer Robinson described it as screaming. When he got to the backyard, he looked inside the home using his flashlight because it was unlit. There was no electricity being used at the house. There was no backyard lighting. Neither of the houses on either side of the home had any illumination. So using only his flashlight, he illuminated what he could into the house. There's a sliding glass door at that part. There's a porch. That sliding glass door was ajar, enough that somebody could pass through that space. He observed suspect Pinedo inside the residence, and he gave him verbal commands. Suspect Pinedo retreated inside the house out of the view of Senior Corporal Meltaberger. Senior Corporal Meltaberger directed his partner, who had also heard suspect Pinedo. He had already started to move toward the backyard. He directed him to come to his location. Officer Robinson has actually had to climb a fence to get to a position where he could observe his trainer. They're both in the backyard, and I'm going to use my hands here. So if this would be Officer Robinson, and this would be Senior Corporal Meltaberger, and this would be the residence in the porch area here. So we're in this general proximity. Senior Corporal Meltaberger continued to give verbal commands to suspect Pinedo to exit the house, and he did. He reappeared and he exited the house. As he came out of the house and he came down that porch, he was yelling unintelligently, and he got to the bottom and he circled. He walked in a circle. He then dropped to his knees and he curled up into a ball. And that was the officer's words. So I guess you could describe it somewhat as a fetal position. He put. Officer Robinson just said that he was hitting his fist onto the ground. Both officers continued to give verbal commands. Both officers still had their pistols drawn and pointed at suspect Pinedo. As they continued to give those instructions, Senior Corporal Melterberger told his partner, Officer Robinson, to cover him. Now what that is that Officer Melterberger was going to de-escalate the situation. He was going to transition from his pistol to a taser. And he was going to use his taser to effect the arrest. And that meant that Officer Robinson would maintain hard cover with his pistol. As he began to do that motion, and that was acknowledged by Officer Robinson that was the process that was going to occur here, as they began to change and he holstered his pistol and he was transitioning to his taser, suspect Pinedo threw something which struck Officer Melterberger in the head, the top of the head. We believe that to be a phone. That's the object that we believe he threw was his phone, his cell phone. Officer Melterberger moved, obviously, away from that danger, from that attack, drew his taser. At the same time, suspect Pinedo jumped up and charged Officer Robinson. As he charged Officer Robinson retreated. The area in which they were in, there was a 4-foot chain link fence separating that property and the property adjacent to it. Officer Robinson retreated until he could retreat no further. He backed up against that fence. And as the suspect charged him, he felt him touch him on this part of his arm, and Officer Robinson fired once. At the same time, unbeknownst to Officer Robinson, Senior Corporal Melterberger was deploying his taser, and the taser struck suspect Pinedo in the back. As I mentioned earlier, suspect Pinedo was transported to Baylor Hospital. He underwent surgery and he was in critical condition, and unfortunately he passed away this morning about 8:30. This is some investigative information that we've developed so far, and our investigation is continuing. Suspect Pinedo and 2 friends had been drinking earlier in the evening, and all those time frames and all that we're still working out, but they had been drinking. We did observe a large glass bottle of alcohol in the residence, and we believe that to be that it was mostly consumed, and we believe that to be part of what they were when they were drinking or socializing. Suspect Pinedo was with 2 acquaintances. They were at a residence nearby, and they were socializing and drinking. Suspect Pinedo's behavior became very disruptive, and it was so concerning that the owner or the person that controlled that location directed suspect Pinedo to leave. So he left, and he left with the other acquaintance. So suspect Pinedo and the other acquaintance then ventured to 1639 Connor. Suspect Pinedo once lived at 1639 Connor. We don't know when he lived there and how long the property's been vacant, but they did return there. Once they were there, they were in the backyard, in the same area in which the officer-involved shooting occurred. Back there with the acquaintance, they continued to socialize. Again, suspect Pinedo's behavior became very disruptive. He began to struggle and fight, was very aggressive with his acquaintance, to the point that his acquaintance was texting their previous friend that they had been socialized earlier, and maybe others. That is still under investigation. But he was sending a text message that he was getting beat up by suspect Pinedo. He fled. He had to leave. He fled the location and he fled. That information was shared with the officers on their arrival, that there was another individual that had fled the location, but he was not there, nor did the officers see him when they arrived at the location. We believe that the neighbor heard the disturbance between suspect Pinedo and his acquaintance in that backyard, and that was the information that was developed that caused him to be concerned and call 911. Good? Okay, Paul. Guys, I'll take a few questions.
Was the house vacant?
The house, we don't know if anybody lives there. That's still under investigation. The neighbor told the responding officers that he was unaware whether or not the house was occupied or not.
So deadly force was justified?
Well, they were still under investigation, sir.
So he was tased and shot essentially at the same time?
Yes, ma'am, simultaneous. It's, you know, I describe it in frames, and I guess you guys can understand it, but this is all occurring from two different perspectives simultaneously. It's overlapping. Yes, ma'am.
Can you just go through the process? I mean, you said there's a proximity here in terms of where he was on the ground, your senior corporal going toward him, and then he gets up and he starts running. How close is he to this officer who invariably then fired his weapon?
Well, let's just say that this is Senior Corporal Melchberger, and this is approximate. Please understand this right. Let's just say that Lynn is suspect Pinedo. This is the general distance that the Senior Corporal would have. He was transitioning from his pistol to his taser. In doing so, and then about the same type of distance would have been that between suspect Pinedo and Officer Robinson, but in that general direction. It was a confined space in that where Officer Robinson was, okay, at that corner of the house, in terms of when suspect Pinedo charged him, his only retreat was backwards, and then he was obstructed. He was not able to put any more distance. Did that answer your question, sir?
So were they just drinking? Was there any other substances being used that you
Don't
know of?
don't know yet. Still under investigation.
Was he armed other than the constable phone? I mean, did he have anything else on him?
He did throw the phone. He attacked Officer Metzger, and then he charged Officer Robinson.
So no weapons?
No weapons, no ma'am.
Is it possible again?
Sense of
Wait,
how
wait.
long it took for all of this to happen? Was it just a few seconds? Had they made contact with him, a minute before all of this happened?
We're still working through that, but it doesn't take long for you to be briefed by a neighbor, walk up to a house. As soon as they came around to the backyard, they actually heard suspect Pinedo in the house. So we're really talking more seconds. Yes, sir.
You said that he was unintelligible when he first was speaking with the officer. Does he speak Spanish?
The officers didn't say anything about foreign language, no ma'am.
Either one of those officers speak Spanish?
I am unaware of either one of them have language skills. One of the things I failed to mention earlier, I apologize for doing that, neither officer has been in a previous shooting. Okay? I mentioned that earlier. Okay, guys.
Did this treaty handle it the same way that a seasoned veteran would have handled it, do you think?
We're done today, and we'll get back to you guys if you have some more information that we're able to develop, okay?